Okay, so we're recording. So good morning. I just wanted to do a check-in today to make sure everyone was doing okay. And this is a complicated course. It's not an easy course. So just wanted to check in and make sure how everyone's doing as well. So we've started a new unit. Covers a lot of different stuff. So this workspace, there's a lot more video that you're covering a lot of content. I do find that students tend to remember this content a little more easily. In grade 11, you would have been introduced to Stalin and Hitler, so you have a basic background on that already likely, and kids tend to like learning that stuff and remember it a little bit more easily. One of the things you need to be careful of when we get into the essay writing portion of this particular unit, sometimes what I find is students do a little bit more storytelling than actually addressing the question. So just keep that in the back in the vault when you're doing your writing assignments. That don't just sit there and tell me a big story about what Stalin and Hitler did. Okay, so that's kind of what ends up happening sometimes because anyone can recite, we call it regurgitating information on Stalin and Hitler. So you are going to recall certain facts on them and items and things they've done, but make sure you explain it and always go back to the question in your writing. Okay, so that's just a little tidbit as we start thinking about this unit in writing, that we don't get too much into the storytelling. So as I said in my email that I sent out prior to the meeting this morning, I want to mess with your brain a little bit. And so I have this in front of me right now. Hopefully you can see this. I've taken the spectrum, and instead of having a nice straight line, I've curved it a little bit. If I usually tell students this beforehand when I'm teaching the political spectrum, not to Google the political spectrum and go online because there's all kinds of different versions and it can really mess you up. The one that I've been teaching you, the straight line, that's the one you want to stick to. So I've taken the straight line, I've just curved it a little bit, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, we still have to the right, we have fascism and inequality, and to the left, we have communism and equality. So remember, when it comes to ideologies, the actual title of this course, it's based on beliefs and values. Those aren't going to change. Where they go on the spectrum is still right wing, left wing, that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. However, I've curved it a little bit because down below I have autocratic. Up above, I have democratic. Earlier in one of my lessons, I talked about reading things. I go on social media. I'm old school. I don't have all that other stuff. I have Facebook, of course. And I read things and responses and even watching the news and different things. And even sometimes in public, people talking about, so-and-so is a communist, fascist, and so on. They are actually at totally opposite ends of the spectrum. They have very different values and beliefs. However, the reason people sometimes get those two mixed up is because they fall under autocratic rule. And in my email, I requested, if you haven't done so already, you'll find a video of myself. It was last year during summer school where I taught democracy versus autocratic rule. And so that's where people get them mixed up. So Stalin was a communist, Hitler was a fascist, very different values, but both are autocratic rulers, certainly not democratic. And so that's why sometimes people will see them as the same and they'll call them that, but it's not really a reality because their values and beliefs are so different. So I hope you understand that. So a way of kind of putting that into mind is if you think of it this way. So both are autocratic rulers. However, they're both on very opposite ends of the spectrum. So again, this is still the right side. This is the left side. We put our democracy up there. If we have liberalism in the center, we still have conservatives to the right. We still have socialists to the left. So the order is never, ever going to change. Depending on the situation, sometimes what will happen is people will move a little bit left or right, but they'll never flip-flop. So later in this unit, you're going to look at Roosevelt and the New Deal. And so Roosevelt, probably have heard of him. He was president of the United States. We know that the United States tends to be right-wing. I want to just block this out for a moment. Okay, let's go back to our original spectrum. Okay, so with our original spectrum, the US tends to be quite right wing, as does Alberta. Alberta is definitely the most right wing province and closest to the US with alignments of values and so on, although we're certainly different as well. So the US tends to be over here. So you would have anywhere in this area, this would be your Democrats, this would be your Republicans. Okay, now the US always tends to be here. During the Great Depression, and I've seen a diploma exam question like this in the past, the US ended up over this way, okay? Because it was so bad, Roosevelt, who was a Democrat, ended up moving the country to the left and really getting involved. So the important thing to understand is that things can change a little bit, okay? So if we have conservatives here, liberals here, let's go with our traditional NDP over here. Top, if conservatives move this way, you know that liberals are going to move this way, NDP is going to move this way. However, the order will never, ever change. If I had different sticky notes, I'd move them all to the side. So all three will move consistently. They're never going to flip-flop. Okay, so keep that in mind. And so when we're looking at our spectrum like this, that's a little bit different. The order is still the same. This is still the left. This is to the right. Okay, so I just wanted to start with that this morning. There's always a chance you will see a different spectrum. Other ones they've done sometimes is they put something like this. They put freedom up here. They put control down here. I forget what they put something else in here, and they'd say, where is Canada? And so you would have to pick a quadrant based on that. So, but I do have an example of that one on a quiz package that I'll give you later to study from. Okay, so I'll stop for a minute and see if there's any questions on this. Hopefully it hasn't confused you too much. You could take that curve and you could straighten it back up. It's just to demonstrate that they're autocratic rule, and that's why Stalin and Hitler sometimes get put together as brothers from another mother, and that's not really quite accurate. Okay, any questions? You can put your hand up, you can unmute, anything. Okay, we're good. Everything always goes back to this spectrum. The whole course is based on ideology, so understanding that. Okay, so what I'll do next is I've got our little guideline on the left-hand side. We're looking at resistance to liberalism, I think is the terminology of the course. And then there's an outright rejection to liberalism. So we want to understand today as we get into fascism, and if you watched the other video, hopefully you did, I explained what fascism was, totalitarianism, all that other stuff. If you have not watched that video, you need to watch it because people get confused with the different words and how this all works. Okay, who's a fascist? Who's a communist? What does totalitarian mean? What is an autocratic ruler? It's all explained in there. What's a dictatorship? So I break it all down, draw it all out, and explain it for you. Okay, so, and I do talk about it in the other video a bit, but the idea is, so we start to see a rejection of liberalism during the Industrial Revolution with the godfather of communism. He looks like a grumpy old Santa Claus, Karl Marx. He pushes for communism. After I mentioned Roosevelt comes into power, the Great Depression happens in 1929. The economies are not doing well, and so there is a movement towards communism. Why? Because if you go to your notes on the spectrum we've done, on the left-hand side, the government's involved, and it pushes for security and stability. Or you have nothing, you're hungry, you don't have shelter, and so on and so forth. Communism does appear appealing to people. And so having something in your basic needs are better than nothing in the eyes of many people. And so this is why communism is appealing to some. In a country like Canada today, where yes, we have homelessness and we have people that are struggling without a doubt, For the most part, however, most people's basic needs are met. And so therefore, we're in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, a thing like communism would not appeal to as many Canadians, as many people. But during the Great Depression era in the 1920s, if you were struggling, and then the Great, when things happen, that is the appeal to communism. Then that brings us to fascism, which is Adolf Hitler started this. It's on the other side. Adolf Hitler actually gets his support in the beginning mainly from the wealthier business class, the capitalist. And the reason being is that to lose to communists, where the head guy says, hey, let's capture all the capitalists, let's kill them, and let's take over their factories, let's take over their stores, and so on and so forth. And so democracy in general is not a strong stand towards communism, because in democracy, even in Canada today, you can run as a Communist Party candidate. And from time to time, we will have people that will vote for the Communist Party of Canada. And so it allows it to actually exist. Whereas under fascism, they would say, no way to communism. We're not going to accept that. We're done with that. And so he starts to get promoted. You would have looked last year in your study of nationalism and all the things he did and the other part of the appeal. So I'm talking about the ideology and the values perspective, but last year you would have looked at the nationalism in Germany. And so you could see how people were caught up in Hitler mania, if you will, and just his charisma and so on. And it's important for us to study this. And in your case studies, it's very difficult, and I want you to be very careful. We do identify positives of Stalin and positives of Hitler. I would think it's safe to agree we all would believe that these people are absolute disgusting monsters. However, we have to look at why people would support someone like this so that we can understand it, okay, better, versus just it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. Okay, yes, most of us would agree that they're horrible people and what Hitler did was bad. But what is it? What appealed to some people to make them want to support someone like Adolf Hitler? And then of course the Holocaust and all that horror that absolutely goes with it. So it's easy to look at the negatives. That's why we do look at the positives. And sometimes people criticize the educational system for looking at the positives of these types of systems. This is why we look at it. It's not to promote it. It's to have a greater understanding of what it's all about. And so what would be the appeal? Okay. And you got to remember as well is that Stalin communism, but there are other societies that some people may like communism and want to support those values. I was in Cuba a couple of years ago talking to some of the people. They're still considered a communist dictatorship. And, I said, off the record, tell me about this. What are your thoughts? And they talked to me, cab drivers and different, what they liked about their system. Okay. The other thing we'll get into as you go on in the course is the Cold War. And so I want you to think about this. What type of country would say communism might work for us? So going back to what I said earlier, if you're a country where you have no power, you, as an individual, you are often an imperialized nation, which you would have studied last year, and you are struggling to get your basic needs met, and along comes a powerful nation that says, hey, we'll help you distribute the land and you'll all have a piece of the pie. You'll all have your basic needs met. And so imagine being a country where the French come in, take it over and control it, and you don't have a lot of anything and you're struggling to survive. And along comes a member of your country that says, I want to help you out. We need to kick the French people out, and we need to make sure that our country is controlled by and owned by our people. Let's do this. And that's what led to the Vietnam War. And so the Vietnamese at the time, they seen the appeal to communism. Communism is not something, none of these ideologies can be forced upon a nation from within inside. Now, there's other countries that can come in and take over, which you'll see during the Cold War. But if there's a buildup from within the nation itself, China being another example, where the people are not typically force, they actually actively engage and they choose to support that ideology. And so we'll see that in Vietnam. And not all Vietnamese certainly supported the Viet Cong, okay, but millions did. And so they chose to go that direction. And that's what the idea is in this unit, is understanding why they would choose that. So if the United States wants to truly avoid communism, and that rather than just going to war, they could be proactive, and they tried to do just that after World War II because they seen the writing on the wall. After World War II, they said, let's make sure countries have money, they can get established and stand on their own 2 feet, so they won't feel desperate and have to go to communism. And so the United States went forward. You'll read about what's called the Truman Doctrine, okay, the Marshall Plan. And so it's all about containing communism and providing financial aid to any country that wanted it after World War II, so that they would build their economies and not have to resort to communism, or in some cases fascism, where there's a rise in nationalism, they want to go out and get resources and so on. So I've given you a brief overview of why some people might like communism based on your stuff you did last year, and a little bit right now on fascism, why some people would like that. Okay, we've looked at the spectrum, and so that's basically it that I wanted to review today. And one more thing, but I'll pause for a moment if there's any questions on communism or fascism or where we're going in this unit. An odd silence as I stare at myself on the screen. Okay, if there's no questions, what I'm going to do is just present for a moment and go to screen. Okay, you should see my screen now. Just going into the retrieval chart and scrolling down. There's going to be a 2-day assignment. And I honestly, if you go hard at this, I don't think it'll take 2 days. And so, where the heck are we? Okay, this presentation, if you guys could open that, I hear someone pounding at the doors here, sorry. If you guys can open this and go to your presentation thing, and I'll be right back. Okay, sorry. So we have some people knocking on the doors, and they're locked here. Okay, so for this section, just a reminder, there's some videos in here as well that you can link up. I have, to be honest, I haven't checked all the links this year, but you do have a lot of videos on the resources already. Okay, so with this, you'll notice you have to actually, so it says after reading chapter 5 and viewing the above PowerPoints, so there's PowerPoints, I've got all kinds of resources at the side. You create a digital presentation. I would probably recommend, to keep things simple, Google Slides. Okay, Prezi, I mean, that's and I know there's other ones out there you guys use. Whatever you use, be it Google Slides or whatever it is, post your link in here, but also make sure that you give me the power to view it. So what happens in here a lot of the time is people post their Google slide, but I have to request permission. Depending on when I mark these, could be late at night, could be a Saturday morning. I want to mark it, and then it says to go in. Also, don't just give me permission to view, give me editing permission as well, please, because I'll want to go in and make comments on that. So Google Slides is easy, but you're welcome to produce this in any different thing. So the idea is you're going to present all of this information. So the difference between radical and reactionary, the reasons for the rise of communism in Russia. So what was it that motivated people in Russia to want to turn towards communism? Land, peace, and bread. There's a little hint there. Why would fascists want to take off, or fascism, why did it take off in Germany? And then some different things in there, propaganda techniques of dictatorships. Now, you can Google all of this stuff, okay, as well. You've covered a lot of stuff. Put some pictures in there, make it a good digital presentation. We want it to flow. Don't just put massive blocks of text and paragraph. Be efficient, put titles and point form. I would much prefer that, and it's better for you, I think, to study and so on and so forth. Okay, you're learning the information and then you're putting it in a nice little slide where you can review it later. Okay, make sure you have enough information. This is grade 12, but I don't want you just cutting and pasting all your information. If you had some kind of timeline or something like that, that's fine, or some diagram you think that works, but I want you to put things in your own words, okay? So this is where it says post your link to your presentation. So whatever format, just post a link here so that I can click on it and see your entire presentation. Okay, so and I'm giving you 2 days to do this. And so I've had kids finish this in 3-4 hours, but I'm giving you 2 days. And I'm not rushing you and saying you should be done in 3 or 4 hours, but some people are different and they're really good at this stuff. Others, it takes them a little bit longer, but this is an opportunity. If you do finish it in the 2 days, then just make sure you're catching up and keeping up on everything else. Okay, that's it for me. I'll hang out, and if any questions, I'll hang around. And just reminder, and some of you email me and ask me questions and stuff. I don't mind at all if you need help. I mean, that's what I'm here for. And so if you need to, hey, can we talk for 10 minutes or can we have a Google Meet to go over something, do a little mini lesson like this or whatever, I can do that. Look at the calendar that I've given you, because sometimes I'm in other classes doing something like this, but I don't have a ton of scheduled classes every day. I'm in the school at least like a little bit after 8 till 4 o'clock every day. And so there's time throughout the day. Actually, I can fit a lot of time in where I can meet with you if you're struggling with anything. Okay, I will shut up now. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, go for it. If not, have a great day.